These are the 5 best faith weapons in Elden Ring. We're starting with the coated swords. These swords do pure holy damage. That is non-split, pure holy damage, which is amazing because that means it only gets mitigated by holy defense. It does not get split and mitigated by both physical and holy. So you definitely want to get these swords. They have a straight sword move set. You can power stance them if you get another one through New Game Plus or through trading. Great jump attack as well, which stacks with the 10% damage boost from Raptor's Black Feathers and the 20% from the Claw Talisman. What's really nice about these swords, since they are pure holy damage, that means you can buff the damage in a lot of ways. The base damage without this talisman is 528. If we add the Sacred Scorpion Charm, that goes up to 592. That's already a pretty big boost, but then my Flask of Wondrous Physic boosts my holy damage, and it also temporarily boosts my faith by 10, because you can see I'm at 70 faith right now, but while that buff is active, it'll be at 80, which is the highest soft cap, so we get the most efficient maximum damage increase to these swords. So we are at 592 AR right now for these swords. If I drink the Flask of Wondrous Physic, you can see we go all the way up to 734, and then if I cast Golden Vow, you can see that we are now at 844. 844 pure holy damage per sword. And I have these power stats. You can absolutely shred through heavy armor with these because, again, physical defense doesn't mitigate this at all. It's pure holy damage, which is absolutely insane. What goes really hand in hand with these swords is the Cipher Pada. It is the other non-split elemental damage weapon in the game. It is also a holy damage weapon, but it is a fist weapon. It looks very similar to the swords. It's shorter, but what's really nice about it is it's weightless. 0 weight. It has absolutely 0 weight, and its damage scales the same way as the coated swords do. So you can see already we have 762 AR on the Cipher Pada with the same buffs that we were using for the coated swords. So there's really no reason not to throw these onto your build because they are weightless. If you are specializing in holy damage, you should definitely throw these on because they're basically free. If you've got the weapon slot, throw them in there. The weapon art is okay. It's not really that great. It is unblockable, which is nice, but I find that it is way too telegraphed and people can see it coming and they can usually get out of the way. So I would generally just stick with your power stance attacks or your jump attacks when it comes to these swords. When it comes to the Cipher Pada, this weapon art is great. It is so good. It comes out so fast. It hits really hard, and just like with the swords, it is completely unblockable. There was a guy with a great shield that I just 2 or 3 punched through his shield. He was so confused. It came out so fast he didn't know what to do, and I absolutely obliterated him. Get out of here, Kratos! Next up is the Winged Scythe. I am holding 2 of them, but you don't have to. I kind of like this running L1. It's nice for catching people in their rolls, but having one is just fine because by far the strength of this weapon is its weapon art. Whenever people are chasing you down and you space it just right and you turn around and you catch them with this, if their poise is low enough, then if you hit them with the first hit, you are guaranteed to land the second. It's a very nice combo. The second hit is what does most of the damage. If you hit with either the first, second, or both, they are prevented from being able to use any of their healing or their mana restoration tear flasks. You can see it right here in the description at the bottom. The White Wings impede recovery actions using a flask of tears. That's not just a healing one, which I mean that is the most important one, but also a mana recovery one. They will not be able to use either flask, which is really nice. It makes it harder for them to heal, and then because I power stance these, I can do the running L1 to more effectively finish them off. But again, that's not necessary. By all means, you could swap to like a heavy thrusting sword instead, something better for chasing people down. But personally, I like using these 2 for the roll catches, but also for the jump attacks. Because remember, I am using the Raven Feathers for a 10% boost to jump attacks. This talisman gives a 20% boost to jump attacks. I like jump attacks. They're great. You get some iframes in them, or at least it does seem to avoid a lot of enemy attacks if you time it just right. So being able to punish it with a very high damage move afterwards is really, really nice. Now, for the AR, you can see right now it's at 737 AR. This is a faith weapon, so we will take off that talisman. You can see it's 689 AR without it, but with it is 737. This boosts the holy damage, so you definitely want that on. Now, if we drink the flask, that boosts our faith by 10 and boosts the holy attack damage. You can see we go from 737 AR to 841. And if we cast Golden Vow, you can see we're up to 967 AR. 967 AR for each of these sights for this, you will hit like a truck. It's absolutely beautiful. It is not pure non-split damage like the Cipher Pada and the coated swords were, but it is still a very, very powerful weapon, and the weapon art is extremely effective. I highly recommend it for PvP. Next up on the list is the Blasphemous Blade. Nobody should be surprised to see this weapon. This weapon is absolutely insane. Frankly, I think I might actually make another build that involves this sword because this sword is so much fun. The amount of damage you could do with this weapon art when you're buffed properly and built properly is absolutely phenomenal. It's so satisfying to one-shot people, especially at range. Like if someone's spamming dragons or if a mage is casting spells, you just snipe them with this fire shockwave thing. It's absolutely beautiful. So let's talk about the weapon itself. It is a greatsword class weapon. For the most part, it's got the greatsword moveset. Unfortunately, it does not have a stab R2. It's got a sweep. I wish it had a stab. The stabs are amazing, but it's fine. It's still an amazing weapon regardless because of the amount of damage you can dish out. Now, while it is a faith weapon, it is a fire faith weapon. So instead of using the sacred scorpion charm, which, oh my gosh, without even buffing anything at all, we're already at 822 AR. Well, we're going to swap this to the fire charm, which is going to raise us to 863 AR. Now, for the Flask of Wondrous Physic, I swapped out the Holy Cracked here with the flame one instead to boost fire damage. So you can see after I drink this, we're going to go up from 863 AR to 952 AR, but we're going to cast a different buff this time. We're going to cast Flame Grant Me Strength. It boosts physical damage by 20% and fire damage by 20%. Now we're at 1143 AR. That is huge. They also significantly boost the damage of this weapon art. If you have all these buffs active and you've got the right build and you hit someone with that, it will most of the time one-shot them. The damage is unreal. And the thing is, sure, this is a fairly popular weapon for obvious reasons. It's so good. So people kind of anticipated they try to get out of the way. But you don't always have to be locked onto them. So let's say this jellyfish is in front of me, right? But I know he's kind of sidestepping this way. He's going to step to my right, his left. So what I could do is I could act like I'm going to swing it forward and then aim it just a bit to the right and catch him in his roll. So if he rolled that way, expecting me to shoot straight, he's going to roll right into the fire and he could potentially just get one-shotted by that. That could do a phenomenal amount of damage. And you're not just dependent on the Ash of War, by the way. I mean, a lot of times I'll even use just some jump attacks or, you know, maybe waiting for an opening and then a quick running attack. I mean, it's a great sword class weapon. Great swords are great. So definitely check this weapon out if you have a faith build. Try out the Ash of War because being able to one-shot people with this feels so good in PvP. And next up, we have Vike's War Spear. This shouldn't be much of a surprise either. This weapon is really popular. It is a very powerful weapon, though, to be honest, I personally don't like it very much because it is more of a defensive weapon. I am a more aggressive player. I like to push in, get in people's faces. So this spear isn't really so much for that, except for its running R2, which is great. Being able to multi-hit with that and then poke is awesome. But if someone has high poise and they have some kind of a moon veil or a rivers of blood, your initial hits are not going to stagger them. That last hit does, but it takes a while for it to come out. So while you're doing those little hits, someone could just counteract with a rivers of blood or a moon veil and the trade will not be favorable. So definitely keep that in mind when you use this weapon. But it is another physical and fire damage based weapon. I do still have the flask active from testing the previous Blasphemous blade. So we're at 734 AR. Let's recast Flame Grant Me Strength because it only lasts 30 seconds. And now you can see we're at 881 AR. Not nearly as high as the Blasphemous blade, but it is a heavy spear. So you have more range. You can play it a bit more carefully. And this weapon's weapon art is really strong too, as you'll see right here. It's always terrifying to see that coming at you. If you get hit by that explosion, it does outrageous damage. But even if you don't get hit by that explosion, if you roll out, you're still going to take some chip damage from those flames on those ground. Those flames will actually chip you out for like about 100 a tick. They hit quite a bit. And some people, they don't even realize they're getting chipped out. They think they survived just fine because they got away from the explosion, only to realize that that flame is eating their health pool alive. So definitely, this is a fantastic weapon. Even if I don't personally like it very much, it is a very strong meta weapon. It is also, to my knowledge, the only weapon in the game that applies madness, aside from the fingerprint shield, but that's not really a weapon, that's a shield. But yeah, fantastic weapon for sure. Highly recommend it. Now for some honorable mentions, there is the Magma Blade. It is a curved sword, a fire curved sword. I gotta say, it looks awesome. I really, really like how these things look. Just a blade of pure curved magma. It's beautiful. And because these are curved swords, they have the curved sword moveset, which is awesome. They have the 4-hit running attack, which is usually used for curved swords when people want to apply bleed. If they seppuku or if they have an occult build, they'll usually try to bleed you out with this kind of a multi-hit. Well, you could also just try to do raw damage with these faith swords. But to be honest, even though you can buff these for decent damage, actually we'll see exactly how much. The base AR is 593 with the talisman, 565 without it. If we buff with the flask, we go up to 652. And then if we buff with Flame Grant Me Strength, because these are fire weapons, then you can see we're at 782. 782 for like a 4-hit like this, that's fantastic. That's great. I mean, don't get me wrong, the damage is phenomenal. But my issue with it is I have mixed feelings about curved swords in general, because if you're fighting someone with high poise, remember what I said about the Vike spear earlier? If you're fighting someone with high poise, sure, if you land all 4 hits, that'll generally be enough to stagger, but in the middle of that attack, a high-poised person could trade with something really devastating like a Rivers of Blood or a Moon Veil or just a straight-up Greatsword Poke or something, and you will generally lose that trade. If you can land the 4-hit combo and get away, great, but I don't really like multi-hitting too much. It leaves you way too wide open. Plus, if you're fighting outnumbered, maybe their friend could jump you. You kind of want to poke quickly and get out, unless you've got some really good AoE, which this sword does have. It does have good AoE, but it's very short range. It's the weapon art, this move. If you hit someone with that, it will generally be a infinite stun lock, maybe unless they have really high poise. But from my experience with it, I've generally stunned players, and it will hit very hard. You can hit maybe 800 to 1K on that. But the problem is the initiation of that move is very short range. Like, look how close they have to be for me to get to hit them with that. That's a very, very short range move. But by all means, if you clip someone with that, then you can land the follow-up and you can do a lot of damage. But at the same time, it's so short range, you might as well just be running around and looking for the running attacks or the jumping attack. I really wish the jumping attack was 2 hits. I hate how the initial animation is just getting the swords ready and then swinging. How awesome would curved swords be if the jumping attack was 4 hits? Honestly, probably broken, to be honest. But anyways, honorable mention. They don't go in the top 5 list. There's something the matter, princess. Another honorable mention is the Halo Scythe. This didn't make the top 5 list, but the Winged Scythe did because the Winged Scythe's weapon art is just so good. Being able to hit someone with this, do so much damage in an AoE, like you can hit multiple people and prevent them from healing, is phenomenal. It gives you an answer up close because the Scythe in general is kind of slow to attack with up close. It's not a great close range weapon, but that weapon art kind of makes up for it. If I target the jellyfish, you can see these discs will hit pretty hard. They're very, very powerful projectile, and I haven't even buffed up yet. As you can see, this scythe is at 640, whereas the winged scythe from before is at 689. That is another issue with this scythe. It places more emphasis on the physical damage, whereas the winged scythe places more emphasis on the holy damage. And remember, we're buffing the holy damage a lot with these various buffs, like the talisman, the flask. So the winged scythe will get a much bigger bonus from that than the Halo Scythe will. But it is worth mentioning the Halo Scythe has some nice projectiles, and we'll show you exactly how the AR changes when we buff up. So we'll swap from the fire one to the holy one. You can see we go from 640 to 668 for that one, whereas the other one goes from 689 to 737. You can see it's a much larger boost because the winged scythe benefits way more from holy damage bonuses than the Halo Scythe does, which is why the winged scythe is in the top 5. And then if we drink our flask, now we're at 723, 841. And then if we cast Golden Vow, then you can see we're at 832 and 967. The winged scythe ultimately comes out on top in terms of damage, but it is just worth mentioning that this other scythe also does fantastic damage too, and it gives you a ranged option if that is something that you prefer instead. As you can see, the rings did way more damage once I buffed up. And that is pretty much it. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe. Plenty more Elden Ring videos are on the way. Good luck with your invasions. Happy hunting!